Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. And as always, I'm glad that you had the opportunity to join us here today. So, if you have read the description, you know that what we're going to be doing here is sharing information and sharing information through a couple of different sources that I will be channeling. And so, one of those will be the deeper aspects of myself. You could say the soul, you could say the higher mind. There's a variety of labels that you could apply to that. It really kind of depends on what your background is. And then another is an aspect of consciousness that, in regular terms, would be termed an extraterrestrial. This is an individual who is from a different civilization than what we know ourselves to be and expresses themselves in a way that's helpful for individuals who, as part of their journey, are embracing moving into contact situations with those other aspects of the oversoul, or all that is. You could say God if you wanted to, that express themselves as extraterrestrials, that express themselves as living in other places, other dimensions, other planets, aspects of ourselves that have information to share with us. And so there's a mixture that goes on there. And sometimes it leans more heavily into one than it does to the other. So, what we'll do here is I will either utilize questions that I've had individuals that have asked, or there may be times where there are themes that the inner me feels is something that we can explore at this particular time that would be helpful for people to understand or hear information from. And it could be either of those aspects. Now, the aspect that shows up that's associated with the other planetary system is termed anima. And it's not the typical term, although I've seen a definition that kind of describes that, but this is an actual individual. And there will be that energy in what we'll be sharing today. So, what we'll do is I'll take a moment, relax, and drop into the process, and then we'll begin to share the information. So, today's information is going to center around the beginning of this journey for individuals. And that, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that it's the very beginning of your journey, but a time when you begin to look beyond, maybe we'll say, more conventional ways of viewing the deeper nature of who you are. You could say religious understandings, and the ideas and the definitions of the soul from those concepts. And you're moving into a broader exploration of all of that. So that beginning point is what we're kind of talking about when we talk about beginnings. So if you will give us a moment. So we are very glad that you've taken the opportunity to join us here today to allow us this interaction with you, to share with you information that, though you hold this information within yourself, you're not familiar with that fact yet. And so you look to those like ourselves to provide this information for you. What you may not understand is that this information that we provide to you is filtered through you in a way. In other words, there's a collaboration that happens between your soul and us as far as what information will be shared with you and how that information will be presented. If you are familiar with this type of phenomenon, or if you are familiar with sharings that may come in written forms, one of the things that you may be familiar with, and if not, you will hear it here, is that no two individuals hear or read the same information. And at first, this can be a confusing thing. And so it's something that we may explain a little bit in this particular session, or it's something that we may explain a little later on. Because again, this is meant for individuals who are a little earlier in their exploration. So when you first begin to explore beyond what you typically have been aware of the, maybe we'll begin by saying the religious nature of your being, because so many times it is presented in that format. And even if you haven't decided to explore beyond the religious aspect of things, you may begin by exploring maybe some of the more esoteric branches of the religion that you've been associated with. Whatever you're doing, what's going on with you is you're looking for a deeper understanding of who and what you are. You've come to the place in your existence where you know that there's more than just the physical experience that you've been having to what your reality is, and you're wanting to explore that. So, of course, we're going to suggest that in that, your soul, your deeper self, your wider self, your higher self, and there's many terms that can be applied, but those aspects of you are aware, of course, that this is what you want to do in this moment, that you want to begin this exploration. And so what they will do, because they know you completely, what they will do is they will then bring into your experience for you information that will then lead you into a deeper understanding of who and what you are. The information that they bring into your experience will be information that fits who you are in this moment. It will be information that will make the most sense to you in this moment. And so you will begin by exploring things that are not that far beyond what you have become familiar with as far as religion may be concerned, a spiritual exploration may be concerned, or maybe even a metaphysical exploration. It depends on where you are. So the beginning will be that. Realize and recognize that however it is that you get that information, really, it's your soul, we'll put it like that for now, that is actually providing you with that information. Now, it's going to do that through a complete understanding of what you believe is true about reality. And then it's going to stretch those boundaries a little bit. It understands your beliefs, the definitions that you have about reality, all the ways that you see reality. It understands that, all of that perfectly, because it's an integral part of what you are. From that position, it will bring into your experience information that will then begin the process for you. As that process deepens, what you're going to find out is that there's a lot of terminology in this exploration. Lots of this terminology, actually, most of that terminology, is terminology that's been provided from a whole variety of sources, because it can be religious sources, it can be spiritual sources, it can be metaphysical sources. And I'm making this differentiation, these delineations, because individuals can look at those as separate ways that information show up. So there's a lot of terminology that you're going to come across as you become familiar with this journey, as you deepen this particular journey for yourself. And it's meant to convey concepts to you that make some sense within the understanding that you presently have. Now, sometimes what happens is that individuals that have put forward ideas and terminology put forward those ideas from a place that is a little less than fully understanding about the idea than what it could actually be. So sometimes you will hear concepts and ideas, and you'll be left with maybe some confusion about what exactly is meant by that. And so, what I'm going to suggest to you, what we'll suggest at this particular moment, is allow the way that you feel about something, if it feels right for you in that moment, allow that to be your guide in the beginning. All right. And we'll go a step further. Talk to the inner you, to your soul, to the spiritual part within you, whatever you would like to say and however you would like to approach that. And say to that aspect of yourself that you would like some guidance in this way. And then just trust that that feeling state that you have will be the guidance that is there for you in that, because your soul, or those inner parts of you, want you to walk this journey in the way that is the least confused, the clearest that it possibly can be for you. Now, of course, you're going to have many concepts and ideas and beliefs that you are going to recognize and move beyond in this particular concept and idea of things. As you do that, you will also leave behind a lot of the language that you were familiar with in the early stages of your exploration. So it will serve you very well to understand that the confusion many times that you'll have is due to the place that you're at in your understanding. We'll just put it like that now. You're beginning to open more doors. You're beginning to walk into a place where, instead of just a narrow trail hemmed in by pine trees, let's say, and all you can see is the trail, you've walked into a place where the vista opens up to you a little bit more, right? And so as you move forward in your exploration, this is the symbology that will fit with that. There's the inner part of you, the deeper part of you, the higher mind, the soul. Those aspects of you are going to attempt to pull you forward, shall we say, to lead you forward into a larger understanding of who and what it is you actually are. And at this moment, what we'll say is that who and what you actually are is the soul, is the higher mind, is the wider self. Again, whatever term you would like to express. As long as we're talking on this subject matter, we'll add just briefly here that in a number of disciplines, there's the concept that the soul resides within the physical form. We'll suggest to you it's actually the opposite. Your experience of physicality, not only you, the physical you, but your experience of physicality all the way around, resides within the soul. The soul is consciousness and energy. It has no limits to it. It is infinite. The things that occur within your reality happen within that environment, happen within the expression of consciousness as the soul. So we can say perhaps your more personalized expression of all of consciousness. You might say the oversoul, you might say all that is, you might say God, right? Whatever it is, whatever term is comfortable for you to use for all of what there is, all of consciousness and all the ways that it expresses itself, right? And by that, of course, you have familiarity that the things around you, because you live in this time period, are created of molecules. Those things are brought together by atoms, and there are small parts of those atoms. And then those atoms, if you explore deeply enough, are a configuration of energy, right? Energy is an expression of consciousness. So energy and consciousness are very closely aligned, right? Consciousness is aware. And consciousness is aware in an infinite number of ways because there is no limitation to consciousness. Consciousness is God. God is consciousness. Consciousness is the soul. The soul is consciousness. We will suggest to you anyway. And so in that, there's no limitations in that regard. The soul, however, we could say, is maybe a more personalized version of all of consciousness. It expresses your experience, right? This version of you. And we're going to leave it in that place for now, but it explores and expresses this version of you. Now, from your perspective, or from the perspective of God, or all that is, some people might say the oversoul, you could say that. Consciousness is explored in ways that sometimes make no sense from our experience, right? Because your experience in physical reality has got certain themes that are very strongly associated with it. And you may not even consider that these are themes that really apply to physical reality only. Themes like planets, themes or ideas like gravity, like air, like water, like land, like oceans, like night and day. There are many, many, many ideas that are associated with this particular expression of the soul, of God, of consciousness, of the oversoul, whatever term you would like to apply. These are the things, these are the ideas that we've become familiar with. And us using the term idea might be a little bit confusing to you. So let's touch on that just a little bit. So in physical reality, there was once the idea of a wheel. And then there was a procedure, a process by which the wheel was first created. And it's had many, many, many iterations, has it not? There are many different types of wheels that you are familiar with throughout what you call history, right? Same thing is true of your computers. They were an idea at one time. They were an idea that went through, again, many iterations, right? Until you have computers like you have in this day and age, in 2024, almost, very close to that. A pen was once an idea. A notebook was once an idea. A cell phone was once an idea. Clothing was once an idea. A belt was once an idea. A television was once an idea. A radio was once an idea. An automobile was once an idea. So all of the things in physical reality started as ideas. This is the way it works at this, we'll just say, layer of your expression as consciousness, right? Within this particular dimension, maybe we'll call it, of physical reality. However, as a you that has a much larger existence, the soul, the oversoul, the spirit, God, whatever you want to say, ideas are of a completely different nature. You may have ideas of civilizations, ideas of dimensions, ideas of planets, ideas of gravity, ideas of light and dark, many, many different types of ideas, ideas of language, right? Various ways of communicating. The theme of ideas is very different than the ideas that we come up with in physical reality. And this is by and large, from our perspective anyway, because we consider those things to just be natural, foundational aspects of our reality, right? And we have various concepts and ideas about how they came into being. But from the understanding of those aspects of consciousness, the soul, God, the oversoul, all that is, these are ideas. They are ways that, from that perspective, we configure consciousness to then experience what it is that we configure. And I probably won't go too far down that road at this particular moment. So, your soul, of course, I'm going to suggest, regardless of what your exploration has been, in other words, regardless of the religion or the spiritual practice that you have been associated with, my suggestion is that the soul, that somewhat personalized aspect of the oversoul, of God, is very aware of how consciousness and energy become this experience, become your experience. It is aware from that place further back, from the place of spirit, from the place of God, from the place of the soul, again, whatever name you would like to use. It is aware, totally aware of all of the ways that consciousness is expressing itself. And it's a huge number of ways. It has chosen, along with a variety of other choices it's made, to explore this particular way of existing. In other words, a physical dimension. And in particular, this physical dimension, the one that's associated with the planet that we call Earth. It's made the choice to associate itself with all of the other souls that have also chosen to explore this particular theme of how consciousness can express itself, come together as a planet and a solar system, as a whole variety of different planets, as galaxies containing many of those, stars, as universes, right? Consciousness configures itself so that the soul, which is also consciousness, expressing itself in a little bit different way. We'll just say it like that for now. So that that soul can experience a whole variety of things, an endless number of things, actually. And so you choose. You choose as this much larger expression of the soul. We could say the oversoul. And there may be different names that you're familiar with. You choose then at the level of the soul, a little bit more personalized aspect of you, to have this particular type of an experience, to have the physical experience, this physical experience, because again, there are many physical experiences. God is infinite and unlimited. All that is infinite and unlimited. Even the oversoul is infinite and unlimited. It's only us in a usually fairly tight awareness of things that attempt to limit what is actually unlimited. Sometimes it can be very difficult for us to understand things that are beyond what we've become familiar with. And that again is what this journey is partially about. It's about loosening up those layers, those walls, those boundaries that we've applied to ourselves to become more familiar with who and what we are. So you choose this experience as the soul. In that, you're familiar with the themes of the exploration that you're going to choose to participate in. Now, just like in your human form, you have 10 fingers. And if you wanted to, you could have a different experience with each of those 10 fingers. You could have one of those fingers maybe dipped in a little bit of a cup that had pudding in it. You could have another one dipped in another cup that has water in it. You could have another one resting on top of an ice cube. You could have another one stuck into a small container that's got some very hot liquid in it. You could have another one that's resting on a piece of sandpaper, and on, right? So you could have 10 different environments, maybe we'll call them experiences, that each of your fingers are having. And you would be able to experience all of those environments that your fingers were having at the same time. However, if you brought your attention to one over the others, you would have a fuller understanding and quality of that experience than if you tried to experience them all at one time. Now, that's in our experience of reality. And I use this because this is, in a way, similar to what the soul does. The soul has, like you have 10 fingers, it has extensions of itself also. Again, we'll put it like that for now. But it has many, 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 many more extensions of itself than just the 10 fingers that you have. You could include your toes, but because they're not very long and they don't spread out very much, there's not as much you could do with them. So we'll stick with the fingers. But the soul has many more of extensions of itself than what you have with your fingers. And so it's able to have experiences through those extensions, just like you can have experiences through the 10 fingers that you have that can all be unique, right? And this is in fact what goes on. The soul experiences through a huge number of extensions very different things. But just like you're having all of those experiences with your 10 fingers at the same time. It's the same with the soul. The soul is having all of those experiences with all of those extensions of itself at the same time, simultaneously. Now, some of those extensions are associated with this particular quote unquote physical reality and the experiences that are associated with it. So, this is associated with the experience that we have that we call time, especially in the way that the idea of time works within this reality, where we experience it to flow from a past, whether it's a recent past or a past in what we term to be much more longer ago, into our present, and then moving into what we call our future. This is what makes sense to us in our physical experience. Because we've had that physical experience, because we are in that physical experience, and depending on our ideas that we're associated with, that are familiar to us in that physical experience, when we begin to explore beyond the regular ideas of our physical experience, it, of course, is a natural thing that we utilize some of the ideas, some of the things that make sense to us, to then explore some of the other attributes of the soul and the way that the soul expresses itself. One of those ideas is what is frequently termed reincarnation. So, the idea of reincarnation is that there's a flow of physical expressions of you. There's a you that lives in this time period. There's a you that, let's say you were born in 1970. Okay. So there's a you that exists someplace before 1970. Let's say a you that was born, we'll just make it easy, a you that was born in the 1800s. And then a you that was born and died in the 1800s. And then there was a you that was born and died in the 1700s, and so on and so forth. Okay, we might skip a couple of centuries. And then, of course, that's heading in the future as well, right? There's a you that will be born after this you, quote unquote, dies, right? And it lives, let's say, for 80 years in the next century. And then that continues. So, what makes sense to us is this flow of expressions of us, physical expressions of us, because that's the way that we're familiar with time. Our experience of time makes that make sense, that there's this flow, there's this reincarnation of us from the us's that exist in the past to this us in the present and the us's that exist in the future. However, if we go back to our metaphor about first our 10 fingers, then the soul and all of its extensions, and the idea that just like we can experience all of our 10 fingers at the same time, all of these extensions of the soul are experienced by the soul at the same time. So the soul then has an extension of itself in what you believe is your present, and it has extensions of itself in all of these other quote unquote time periods, and it experiences itself as those expressions of itself. Whether you have the same sex back then, whether you have a different sex back then, doesn't really make any difference. Okay, if we're talking about the human expression, right? So when it comes to the idea then of reincarnation, it actually really doesn't work that way, because from the soul's perspective, there is no concept of this effect of time that affects the soul. And as we progress in the information that we'll share this idea of time in a little deeper way. But from this perspective, you may be able to understand that the soul sits outside of time and it extends itself into various expressions, various experiences of our planet. We'll just leave it there for now. And all the various all the various time periods that are expressed on our planet, right? Because there are many versions of our planet. We'll say it like that. There's not just a single version of our planet. And again, that makes sense to us, right? That there's been one Earth, because again, from the concept of thinking that we're the body and all of the things that are familiar to us as the body, the senses that are familiar with us as the body, and the way that we use them, thinking that we are just the body, there are so many concepts and ideas that make sense to us from that perspective. But from the soul's perspective, it's much broader. It's much deeper than that. It occurs in a way that until we get into our exploration to a particular depth, that won't make any sense to us. And so we bring this up because in this idea of reincarnation, sometimes the ability of you as an expression of the soul to make any choices you want to can be colored by ideas of reincarnation. And in that, there can be ideas that because you have experiences as other individuals within this quote unquote timeline, and because those experiences are strong, or perhaps because in your most recent, in terms of time, physical experience, you haven't finished up certain ideas, or you've maybe expressed yourself in ways that maybe weren't the nicest way to express yourself, that those ideas, those themes, those energies then will show up here. And I'm going to express to you and suggest to you that that's a fairly limited way to understand who and what it is that you are. Now, because all these extensions of the soul are an integral part of the soul, they all flow through the soul. We'll just say it like that for now. So all of these extensions of the soul are connected, just like your 10 fingers are connected through your body to all the rest of your fingers, right? So all of these extensions of the soul are connected. So in that way, this you is connected to all of the other quote unquote incarnations of you. But it's not the idea that because something is happening in someone else's life, you need to feel the effects of that. Unless it coincides with the type of exploration that you have chosen to have in this particular expression of yourself. Or much more commonly, if you have a challenge going on in your life right now, if there's beliefs that you have, and there are many, many different beliefs that are associated with this particular physical expression, and there can be many challenges. They usually don't all show up at the same time. They usually show up at various time periods, usually focused on usually a challenge or several challenges at once. But the way that it actually works is that because you are connected to all of these other extensions of the soul, because you are an extension of the soul, you are the soul, and you extend yourself into this experience, but you've also extended yourself into all other experiences. So if there's a common challenge, if there's a common feeling state, if there's a common emotion, if there's a common energy between what you have going on here and what are happening in some of these other extensions of you, these other incarnations of you, there's going to be, of course, an resonance, shall we say, a vibrational similarity to that energy. And in that, you will tie into those other yous, right? And so, what you can do in that regard is you can make your challenge more challenging. But likewise, you can make your inspiration more inspiring. So it works in all ways, right? What will automatically happen from the level of the soul is that whatever it is that you are exploring, if there are any things that are going on in the other extensions, the other explorations of the soul that in any way, shape, or form support that exploration, you have access to those events, to those energies, to those feelings, to those emotions. You have access to all those things. And you will use those dependent on what the beliefs and the definitions are that are associated with the way that you're expressing this you. So there are filters that you have that are associated with your expression of yourself in this particular time, shall we say, that the rest of consciousness is filtered through. And that is your beliefs and your definitions, largely. So not everything just shows up at your doorstep. The things that show up at your doorstep are very much aligned with the way that you see the world and yourself at the time, what you believe is true about you, what you believe is true about the world. Those are the things that you'll connect to as you have your experiences, whether they're challenging experiences or whether they're very satisfying and fulfilling experiences. So, like with this subject matter, incarnation or reincarnation, there's going to be many ideas that you are going to run across in your journey and in your exploration of self. A certain amount of that is going to be expressed from a place that is maybe not quite as wide an understanding of what's actually going on as it could be. There's also the idea that you may hear a whole variety of ways that something is expressed. And it can be sometimes confusing to figure out for yourself, well, which is the way that this particular idea should be embraced. And so we'll say something here. And that something that we're going to say is that think of it as how it should be embraced by you and by you in this moment. Because the you in this moment has a particular way of seeing themselves and seeing their environment. And that's going to move and change and shift as you become increasingly aware of the you that you actually are, the soul of you, the higher mind of you, the oversoul of you. Again, whatever term you would like to use. So again, in collaboration with your soul, with the spiritual aspect of yourself, with your higher mind, with the wider you, it's a dialogue that occurs, right? You can have that dialogue daily. What I'm interested in is being familiar, having an awareness through the feeling state that you bring to me and through other things. There's many concepts, many ways that your intuition can work. that can help you to identify the information that will best support your process in this moment. And so we'll suggest that you practice with that as well and learn to trust that. That's part of it also. The difficulty in this path sometimes, depending on what you've been associated with, is that sometimes, depending on the religious or spiritual associations that you've had, the aspect of the soul or whatever it is that represented all of consciousness had a positive and a negative side to it, right? So we're going to suggest to you that really that deeper aspect of yourself, the soul, the oversoul, the higher mind, really only has your, we'll just put it like this, best interest at heart. Many times, what's difficult is you don't understand the filters, the beliefs, the definitions that you have working in the background that are there to make your life more difficult. This has always been a part of the theme of this particular physical dimension, are the filters of beliefs and definitions. But it's usually not been understood. And it's a very powerful thing. And so, depending on the ideas that are prevalent in particular time periods and in particular cultures, there are various beliefs that are at work, right? There are many beliefs that were utilized in quote unquote past historical times that you would scoff at right now. You would go, well, that doesn't make any sense. And likewise, as we move quote unquote into our future, there are future versions of you that will, in terms of time, look back at the beliefs that we had in this time period and think again, well, that's a fairly limited way to understand who and what we were. But from that vantage point, they'll, of course, you are, of course, understanding of the filters that you were using to understand things in the way that we understand things now, as far as how we're limited in our understanding, right? So again, you're going to be exposed to a lot of things on this journey, a lot of language, a lot of ideas. Some of those can be relatively constrained in nature, relatively narrow in nature. Now, even some of the narrow ones, depending on what your exploration's been like, can serve you for a particular time, we'll say. They can move you forward. But when you reach the limit of how that's going to be helpful for you, you will understand it if you want to understand it. You'll feel constrained. You'll have an understanding, a feeling that this is not serving you, benefiting you in the way that it once did, which was to move you one step further in a deeper understanding of yourself. And as you move deeper and deeper into your exploration, the information that will serve you in that will only be information that has very little or no boundaries around it. Because as the soul, as the self, as the oversoul, as the higher mind, there are no boundaries around you, right? You've made it seem like you have boundaries around you within the experience, but there are no boundaries around you. So as you begin to explore and as you move forward in that exploration, in this exploration, once you become interested in this exploration, which means your self-exploration, who you are, how you are interacted with all this experience, how this experience comes about, how you express yourself, why you express yourself in particular ways, how you can be in more immediate connection with those deeper parts of yourself and pull those things, that awareness, that knowledge, that wisdom forward and express it into your life here. As you walk that path, information that is more constrained will be information that will no longer interest you any longer. It will need to be more and more open all the time because that's the nature of your being. You are an infinite being at your core. You are unlimited at your core. So, for this particular episode, this is where we're going to leave things. Understand that you are going to run into information, as we said, that is going to have limitations to some degree or another. Just be aware that that may be true with some things. And when things become a little confusing for you, try to listen to the information that you're getting from your soul, from yourself, from your higher mind. It'll come of the form of how you feel about things frequently. Or it can come in the form of intuition, impressions, impulses, inspiration, a whole variety of things that are like that too. There's particular ways, actually many, many ways, that your soul, the deeper you, will communicate with you. And as you walk this journey, you'll learn to trust that more. And you'll also become familiar with the variety of forms that that takes. So, in that, we will finish with what we're going to chat with you about today. And again, we will wish you well in your exploration of who and what you are. And we will see you the next time around. Hello, guys. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. And as you've already heard, we will see you the next time that we do this. Take care.